All right. Welcome, everyone. It is really wonderful to have all of you here today. I know Bethany and I, as well as our other partners, have been really looking forward to this session for a couple of months now, and just trying to support all of you. I'm excited to learn from this session, but really feeling like we can come together in this space and do something together. So to start here is with a pop quiz before we get into any of the content or intros or anything like that. You are not being graded, I promise you. Okay, so I'm going to read a few actions out loud. And if you think that this is legal for a nonprofit registered as a 501c3 to do, please raise your hand. You can do so in your video. You can click your raise hand button. You can type it in the chat, however you would like to virtually raise your hand today. We would love to see your beautiful, beautiful faces. So if you think it's legal for a nonprofit registered as a 501c3 to post on social media about a policy issue, raise your hand. All right, seeing quite a few hands there. Wonderful. I'll reveal the answers at the end once we're done with these. Okay. What about attending a public hearing and sharing your perspective as a nonprofit registered as a 501c3? All right, quite a few hands there. Great. Okay, what about emailing your legislator about a bill related to your work? Is that legal for a nonprofit registered as a 501c3 to do? All right, lots of hands up, some thumbs up. That's great. What about educating your community on a ballot initiative? Raise your hand if you think that is legal for a nonprofit registered as a 501c3 to do. All right. Great. And the last one here, raise your hand if you think it's legal for a nonprofit registered as a 501c3 to share with your members of Congress how executive orders are impacting your organization. See hands on that. Great. We're going to go back to that last one first. Wonderful. Well, for participating in this non-graded pop quiz, whether or not you've raised your hand for just a few of those, all of those, every single one of those is legal for nonprofits registered as 501c3s to engage in. Not only are these legal, really powerful ways to get involved, and in many cases, they're deeply needed. Yet, so many nonprofits, so many of us in the nonprofit sector stay silent because we're worried, unsure, or afraid of doing the wrong thing. That's totally valid. I fear some of that myself. But today we're here to replace that with clarity, confidence, and a little bit of courage. Before we jump into our actual session today, I want to start by grounding us in the space that we're in. So I'll start with our land acknowledgement here. If you would like to put your feet flat on the floor, if you're able, feel free to close your eyes, maybe touch something that connects you to the land that you're on. I acknowledge the Ute, Arapaho, and Oceti-Sakowin peoples as the past, present, and rightful stewards of the land on which I have the privilege to live, work, learn, and gather. We commit individually and collectively to the ongoing work of dismantling systems of colonization. I invite you to take a moment to honor the original peoples of the place you are in today. Thank you. Now, some agreements for the space that we're in today. We are kind of creating our own small 2-hour community here that I hope you'll continue along with us as consultants for good, with Snyder strategies, and with some of our other partners as well. But for today, some community agreements Human firsting. So take care of yourself however you need. You're a human coming to this space first. I know that this work can be heavy. There's room here for hope, fear, anger, grief, inspiration, whatever you're coming with. So if you need to step out, drink water, whatever you need to feel grounded today, please take care of yourself as a human first. Share courageously and listen generally. Speak your truth if you're moved to, but make space for others' truths as well. Stories stay and learnings leave. We're going to hold each other's stories with care. What we learn can leave the room, but the details should stay here. We are recording the session, so if there's anything that you shared that you'd prefer be removed from the recording, just let me know, and I'm happy to cut that out before I share the recording with all of our registrants. Assume best intentions and attend to impact. So we'll give each other grace today, assuming that everybody has good intentions, but we're also going to stay open to being gently corrected if something lands harmfully. Action looks different for everyone. Some of us are going to leave this call, be ready to jump in. Other people are still finding our footing. Both of these are valid, and no need to prove how much action you're going to take today. And lastly, accepting non-closure. We will not be fixing things today. That's okay, but we'll be making progress by being in this work together, building a little bit of community around sitting in this work together, and starting to have some more clarity and resources so that we can start moving forward. I want to share a little bit more about what it means to be in the Consultants for Good community, as I know we've got some folks here who are new to this space as well. Before we jump into this, if you want to pause just before we get into this topic today, I just want folks to have some space to take a deep breath and kind of settle into your space wherever it is that you're joining from. And then if you can turn on your video, if you're open to it, look around and see who else is in the room. Maybe make eye contact with somebody else who's joining and give a little wave to someone else on the screen just to see who's all here in this community for the next 2 hours today. That's great. I love seeing everybody's faces pop on camera. So thanks for joining us today in that. So for those of you who are new to this space, welcome. My name is Lauren Andrasky, and I'm with Consultants for Good. We're a community of nonprofit consultants and social impact professionals committed to making it easier for nonprofits to find the right support at the right time for the work that they need support on right now. We support nonprofit consultants primarily, and we support nonprofit consultants so that they can support nonprofits better. And we approach that with a community mindset, since I know it can be really lonely being a nonprofit consultant. That's where I started and why I started Consultants for Good, because I was a very lonely solopreneur with a lot of stupid questions that I didn't want to ask in front of potential clients. But also part of where I started was I was taking on projects that were a terrible fit for my skills, but people were willing to hire me for them, which meant that these nonprofits were not getting the best support that they could. And so by doing this work in community instead of entirely solo, we're supporting both nonprofit consultants and nonprofit organizations to be working in less of a silo. We also support foundations and funders to provide these services to their nonprofit grantees. So things like our Consultant Match Lab, where we will run a nonprofit's consultant search process, our health and benefits program, and other things like that, including expert support, capacity building support, and things like today's session with Bethany. One of those that's a little bit newer, and I think especially right now, as we're seeing a lot of these policy changes and funding changes, it's become, I think that consultants can be a really good way to bridge that gap, to bring in somebody who knows exactly how to help you. They're an expert in the area that you need support in. If you have a hiring freeze or anything like that, consultants can be a really excellent expert or an excellent resource to bring in, support your nonprofit, especially for a more specific and time-bound resource. Another area that you can really lean on consultants, you'll see some of that today, is on navigating this world of advocacy and lobbying and what nonprofits can and can't do. It's actually getting support. If that's not something your organization has the capacity to do yourself, you can bring in a consultant and get some support around that area. If you want to learn more about what we're doing at Consultants for Good, we also have a landscape analysis to see what's going on in the entire consulting sector, what's going on in our community, and just get a sense of the kinds of things that consultants can support you with. And that is all free as well. So with that, I'm excited to kick off our content for today on how nonprofits and consultants can push back against harmful policies. If there was anything that you did not raise your hand for in the beginning pop quiz, already you can see that you've got more power than you think. One of the ways that we're doing that is through all of our partners. So all of these folks came together today, not as sponsors, but as folks that also really care about this work. They helped us share this session. They invited their members, they promoted it, and really helped us create the session that we're doing today to make sure that we are all doing this in community instead of all hosting our own separate one-off events, but really trying to bring folks together for this content to learn from each other, to learn from Bethany today. So a huge thank you to all of these incredible partners. It was really exciting to have all of these folks agree and also be excited knowing the importance of this content, especially right now. All right. So I am going to hand things over to Bethany. Bethany is an advocacy extraordinaire. She is absolutely incredible. Anytime I get any sort of question about advocacy, I always look to Bethany. I follow Bethany's work to make sure that I know what's going on and know things that can be shared. And I'm just really thrilled to be partnering with Bethany again today for today's session. So Bethany, with that, I will hand it over to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I have been looking forward to this for so long, and I'm so excited to be here. So yeah, we're just going to dive in. Let me start sharing my screen. And here we go. Hi, everyone. How are we feeling? It's already been a rough week, kind of, I know, in the nonprofit sector. I kind of feel like it's been the last 100 days have been kind of rough, as I've been reminding. So, but how I manage these rough times is think about what is that little space that I can control? What's that little place where I can make a difference? And I'm hoping this will help you with that. So this is what you're going to learn today. We're going to talk about the evolving field of advocacy. I've been doing this for like 25 years, and it's evolving, and that has created opportunities for us as consultants and nonprofits. We're going to talk about the importance of communicating effectively and building relationships with lawmakers, understanding what advocacy is and what it isn't. This is a big one, obviously, in the nonprofit sector. How consultants and nonprofit leaders can team up to build policy power, and tips to increase your skills, abilities, and confidence when you're engaging in advocacy. So, like I said, I'm really excited to be here. This is like my favorite topic of all time. I can't stop talking about nonprofit advocacy. So this is pretty much my jam. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I refer to myself as an advocacy strategist, enthusiast, and optimist. Even today, I still believe that we can make a difference through advocacy and through policy change. Wholeheartedly believe in that. And as I tell people, I've been on all sides of the advocacy desk. I started my career as a grassroots advocacy director for the American Heart Association. I helped pass smoke-free air campaigns in the early aughts. I love talking. I'm a guest lecturer at the University of Iowa. I'm currently based in Iowa. And when I talk about this, I love telling the students, like, you could be smoking cigarettes right here in this auditorium. Isn't that just crazy? Like, you could like smoke, they had like ashtrays on grocery carts. You could like look at bananas and smoke a cigarette. Anyway, their minds are blown. So as one of the first, that was one of my first kind of campaigns that I worked on. I was a lobbyist for senior health care. I always tell people the greatest lesson I learned being a lobbyist is that I didn't want to be a lobbyist. So I'll talk more about that. So I feel no shame throwing shade on lobbyists. But I also know why they're so valuable. I was a healthcare consultant. I help implement healthcare, the Obamacare programs in California and Minnesota. I was a communication strategist for a national organization working to end homelessness. But most notably, I was a United States Senate staffer for 5 years. I worked for Senator Al Franken in his Minnesota office. I was his healthcare representative in Minnesota. So we're going to talk about that. There's people right there in your state. You don't have to go to DC to talk to your federal folks. My policy portfolio was healthcare, children's, nutrition, seniors, LGBTQ, and I got arts and culture added on to the end. So I'll be bringing a lot of that in and talking about that experience throughout this. So yeah, like I said, I've been on all sides of the advocacy desk. I have sat across from thousands of folks just like you, trying to make their worlds better through policy change. And I'm excited to share my expertise with you. So let's talk a little bit about nonprofit advocacy and its role in strengthening our communities. This is going to be like the 30,000 foot, but really set the context for what's going on right now. So I heard Trista Harris a few years ago say this, and it really resonated with me. And it said, nonprofits love to be in love with the problem, and we need to start being in love with the solution, right? And I know a lot of us, our goals are, as a nonprofit leader or helping our clients, is to put them out of business, right? We want to solve homelessness, we want to solve hunger, we want to solve healthcare disparities, right? But we know to do that, we need policy change, right? These are all upstream challenges that we need to be facing. So I really ground myself in this when I think about advocacy. Okay, so what's going on? So this is where the context thing. So this gridlock in DC, right? I call, that's an understatement of a century. I actually moved. So I went to the university. I grew up in Iowa, went to the University of Iowa, and then I moved away from here for 22 years. Just moved back in 2019 to help care for my family and my parents. But my first job out of college as a doughy-eyed Iowan was I got a job in DC. I'd only been to DC twice in my life, as on a school trip and a family vacation. And I worked in off the hill politics then, what we call it, off the hill advocacy. So I worked for a feminist think tank and a reproductive rights organization. And I remember meeting other people who had lived there and them saying, "Oh my gosh, it's getting so bad." This is like in the early 2000s. We used to go out as, the healthcare committees, regardless of what side of the aisle they are on or what their political party affiliation was. We used to go out for happy hours, and that's just changing. And this was 20, 22, 25 years ago. And that's been getting even worse over time. But what that means is there's more actions in the state and at the local level. And we're starting to see a lot of this partisan divide kind of infiltrate our kind of municipal and local and state politics. But that's still where more of the action lies. And that's where some of these opportunities are created for nonprofits. There's also a lack of institutional knowledge and subject matter expertise. I'm going to talk more about this later. But in Capitol Hill and in policymaking bodies across the country. And so this is because of a few things. We have sometimes this is going to sound like a poli-sci 101 course, so sorry about that, but we have a waning incumbency factor. So the incumbency factor is, right, people who tend to be in office get reelected for office, right? They're the incumbents. And so there's this incumbency factor that's going down. People aren't being reelected as easily as they used to be. There still is an incumbency factor. People aren't running for office. They're not staying in office as long. Now we can talk about whether, term limits are a good thing or a bad thing for our policymaking system. But the fact is lawmakers are staying in office. And what happens is they often, and we hope they develop a policy expertise in maybe the committees they're on, or maybe the occupation they came from. And so that means that we just are losing that subject matter expertise. I kind of laugh when I talk about this one because, again, I live in Iowa. Senator Chuck Grassley is my senator. I just learned, turned 92 years old. He has been in office since 1847. No, he has literally been in office the whole time I've been alive. He started in the House of Representatives in like 1973 or something. So he's an outlier now. People are just, again, not staying in office as long. And at the state and local levels, there aren't policy experts, right? They don't have policy experts like me sitting next to them researching these issues. So there's a lack of institutional knowledge and subject matter expertise. And then there's these massive threats to the nonprofit environment and operating environment, right? We see these executive orders, DEI, funding, advocacy, AmeriCorps just this week. That's what I've been dealing with this week. And so, yeah, how do we put that all together and make sure that the nonprofit sector stays safe and strong? So I wholeheartedly believe that the health and strength of our democracy depends on nonprofits being engaged in our policy making. And I'm not here to blame the victim, but one of the things I'm going to say is we're in this situation because nonprofits haven't been engaged in advocacy, right? some of these challenges that we're facing is because we haven't stepped out there and been bold and talked about what our missions are and how they impact and how policy can impact them. Right. So we need more nonprofits to be big and bold and stand up. And our democracy depends on it, literally. And I think as much as I hate to be, we're seeing it right now. I hate that we're come to this inflection point, but this is what we're seeing. So these are some of the lobbying trends over time. Sometimes I don't know, I don't know if this is good or bad. This does include nonprofits and includes C3s, C4s, C6s in here and corporate entities. I used to have just a corporate one, but they don't have those numbers. They don't have I couldn't find it broken out anymore. But this is from Open Secrets, lobbying trends. But yeah, there's a ton of lobbyists, a ton of lobbying happening. I just want to remind folks, and lobbying gets a really bad rap. Okay. Lobbyists get a bad rap. I'm going to talk about that, but there's also, right, the good guys lobbying that. And I want more of the good guys lobbying. I want these blue bars to be made up of healthcare, to be made up of nonprofits solving problems, right? That's the only way that we can really fight back. So as I said, advocacy is evolving. There's increasing pressure on lawmakers to respond to their voters' questions and concerns. We are in an information age, right? You can get a hold of your lawmakers easier than you ever have before. And I think that's great. I love the democratization of our democracy, if one would want to say that. But that also means that they need information to then help, respond to their constituents and their voters' questions and concerns. They need credible, factual information from districts and communities that they serve, right in the heart of their communities where nonprofits are located. They are in search of examples that help explain complex issues, right? How do we explain how these issues impact our community and the impact of them on our community members? And they need to understand the impact on our community and specific populations. And you're going to hear me repeat these themes all throughout. And this is where nonprofits excel. And that's how I refer to this nonprofit advocacy superpowers. Nonprofits have 4 advocacy superpowers that no other entities have, that are gold mines in advocacy, gold mines that corporations would love to have. But nonprofits have these in spades, and we're not utilizing them or leveraging them. And it just drives me crazy, people. So the first one is subject matter expertise. We just heard about this. There's lack of subject matter expertise in Capitol Hills, in city halls, and county commissioner offices across the country. Your clients and you nonprofit leaders have this. All those grant reports you write begrudgingly that take up so much of your time, they are chocked full of information that all lawmakers need to know, right? You already have this stuff at your fingertips. You are working in every day. You'll hear me repeating this theme. I guarantee when you talk to a lawmaker, unless they specifically worked in your sector or worked in your organization, you know more about them, about your issue than they do. 1000%. Guaranteed. So I already told you about what my policy portfolio was for Senator Franken, right? You heard healthcare, seniors, children. So just think about those. So within healthcare, and I'm a smart person, but even within healthcare, I had to be responsible for at least knowing something about or knowing someone who knew something about pharmaceutical industry, medical device industry, Medicaid, Medicare, pediatric dentistry, behavioral health sector, compounding pharmaceuticals. These are all things I worked on, by the way. All these things I just listed are all bills that I worked on. Diabetes research. If a bill came in front of me, I'm a smart person, but I don't know everything there is to know about insurance markets, right? Who are the people who's going to be on my speed dial? Do you want it to be the insurance industry? Do you want it to be pharma, or do you want it to be a nonprofit? Right. So we're going to talk about this. Think about that. Again, access to localized data and information. Nonprofits have this in spades. Nonprofits are uniquely positioned in their communities. And you can talk about how many people are impacted by this, how many people are affected by this, how many people are experiencing hunger or food instability? How many people are experiencing homelessness? You have this information, whether it's because you have to give it to, these funders, or you just are collecting this information. This is valuable information for our lawmakers. You have stories from people with lived expertise. Again, every day, you or your clients or your client staff every day are working with people who are living the failures of our public policy, right? They are living the failures of it. Notice I use people with lived expertise, not lived experience. Use that word very deliberately because they have an expertise. If they didn't have it, you wouldn't be asking them for it. I'm not going to get into this very much, but you need to pay people for that expertise. If you're collecting stories or interviewing people, again, I'm not going to get into that too much. If you want to contact me later, I have ways that we can talk about that. But stories with people with lived expertise. How is this really impacting people on the ground? And then access to people who care and are motivated to act. Your donors, your board, your staff, your volunteers. You have all these people who care about your missions right now and are motivated to act. These are the 4 nonprofit advocacy superpowers. This is what every single organization that does advocacy wants to have, and nonprofits have them in spades. But your greatest asset through all of this is people. We forget it's people who vote, right? Nonprofits don't have money. We may have a C4, we may have an affiliated PAC, but we don't have deep pockets. We don't have corporate PACs. And that's okay, because you know what? Money doesn't vote. People do. People vote, and that's what matters. We have access to people, and that's our greatest asset. And as the role in consultants, you can act as advocacy force multipliers through your strategic communications, through campaign planning, policy analysis, coalition facilitation. And I really like to work with consultants to help them keep advocacy in mind. When you're doing a fundraising or strategic planning, financial planning, et cetera, how are you keeping advocacy in mind? How are you making sure that you can raise advocacy up to meet these goals? And I'm going to talk about ways that you can influence these. And I'm always available to chat as well with other consultants about this. Okay, so I also have pop quizzes. So you can just put this in the chat. And I think I have 3 or 4 questions throughout this time. So why do you think nonprofits are hesitant to engage in advocacy? Now, some of you are going to read these and be like, all of them, Bethany, but choose the one you think is most. Don't have the capacity. They lack staff, time, and resources. They think they can't. They think it's illegal. Not sure if they will have an impact on policy changes. They don't know how, or their funders and donors don't want them to. What do you think? What do you think is the reason? See a lot of ones, Yeah. I would love it if someone would want to jump off mute and just tell me the reason for their answer. I just love to hear just someone's rationale and why you chose 4 or 1 or 5. Who's going to be, this whole workshop is going to be about being big and bold. So who's going to be bold?
Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Sam. I'm happy to weigh in for what it's
Awesome, Sam. Thank you.
Hi. I'm an attorney, and as someone who's worked at a nonprofit that housed both a C3 and C4 arm, I do think that it gets confusing and gray area. So I
Okay.
don't know if it's the right answer, but for me personally, as like an in-house lawyer, I found that the legality is nerve-wracking for many.
Right. Yeah. So maybe is that maybe number 2 or 4, maybe?
No, number 2. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Understanding advocacy versus lobbying and how that's defined differently. I think it's tricky, but that's just my experience. Thank you so much for your expertise.
Thank you. Yes, that is. And most of this I'll talk about is from the C3 perspective. So just keep that in mind. If you have a C4, you can obviously do more things, but I'm happy to also have a conversation with you offline as well about some of those things. I'm on the board. So not only do I do all this stuff professionally, I'm also, of course, serve on board of directors because that's what we do, right? So I'm on the board of director of Family Equality, which is a C3, and then on One Iowa Action, which is the C4 arm of our statewide LGBTQ org, which also has a C3 and a PAC. So we can talk about all these things. You guys are all like, oh my God, you're blowing my mind already. Why are you saying these words? So yeah, we talked about retribution is also, That's actually a really new thing in our advocacy sector. That's another way where advocacy is evolving. We haven't really seen that in the past. And we have that a lot in the state that I'm working in. It requires know-how to do advocacy campaigns for small. Yeah, finding an advocacy message that doesn't alienate donors or stakeholders. Got it. Yep. Fear of alienation is a big one, especially in these polarized times. Well, thank you. Well, we're going to go through all of these. So we're going to talk about understanding advocacy, what it is and what it is not. This is kind of my favorite, one of my favorite sections. I mean, they're all my favorite. It's like seeing your favorite child. I love all the sections, but this is again, we're going to get a little bit of policy 101 here. So there's different ways to make change. There's different change agents in the policymaking world. And so I'm going to start on the right-hand side, electoral change. We just had a big election. Now I say this very tongue-in-cheek. The easiest way to get policy change made is to elect people who want the same change as you, right? That is the easiest way. If you just elect everyone who wants the exact same policy change as you, it becomes real easy. Of course, that's very difficult, right? But that is a real, that is a way to make policy changes through electoral change. Now, I'm not going to get into this. I can do a whole webinar on this, but of course, nonprofits, 501c3 aren't engaged in elections. I'll talk about this a little bit more. There are ways that we encourage nonprofits to be engaged in elections, but obviously not partisan. But so we have electoral change, electing the people who believe the same way we do and have the same perspective on policy change. Resistance and protest, right? Using public means of communication and the media to show that you have people on your side. You have all these people who also agree with you, right? So we saw a lot of this during the pandemic and after the George Floyd uprising. We've seen this all throughout history, right? Resistance and protest, sit-ins, die-ins, rallies, marches, right? And then we have effective legislative advocacy, which is changing our policies through legislative advocacy, using our policy making procedures to change policies. So, and I always say effective legislative advocacy, and I do that really intentionally because I see so much ineffective legislative advocacy happening. So our time and our resources are limited. I don't want you doing things that aren't effective, right? So effective legislative advocacy, especially when I worked for Senator Franken, I saw so much ineffective advocacy. And that's actually why I started my consulting firm, is because I was like, people, who's teaching you this stuff? Let's do something about this. Now, many organizations do all three of these things. Some focus more on electoral, some might focus more on resistance and protest, some on legislative advocacy, some on all three, some on one or two, right? Probably the most effective ones probably do all three if you have the time and resources and money, understanding you can't. But we're just going to focus on that one bubble today. Now, within advocacy, more poli-sci 101, this is the three-legged stool of advocacy. So it all rests on policy research and development, right? Want to end homelessness. How do we do that? Someone has researched it. Someone has looked at the solutions and said, this is what helps. How do we end diabetes? How do we end healthcare disparities, right? How do we increase food stability? It all rests on having a policy research and development. Like, no, what do you want? What are you trying to do here? And then after that, there's three different kinds of advocacy. So I'll start on the right, media advocacy or media communications. So again, these are op-eds, letters to the editor, using the media to educate lawmakers and the public about your issue. I don't know about you, but my favorite section is the letters to the editor of our local newspaper. I learn so many things every day about people, and I love that. Now, this is an area that is definitely changing, right? Our mass communications system. Journalism is, changing faster than advocacy. And so sometimes when is journalism even relevant anymore? Are people reading newspapers? Well, I'll tell you one thing. If there's one group of people that is going to keep the newspaper business in business, it's going to be lawmakers. So when I worked for Senator Franken, we had a poor intern who woke up. I don't know what time they woke up. All I know, maybe 3, 4 in the morning. All I know is every morning I woke up, I had an email that had all the clips from the newspapers that mentioned my boss's name. And then I, as the healthcare person, I had all the clips that mentioned healthcare in Minnesota's newspapers. So I could see, how are people talking about this? What is on people's minds? What are the top trends happening in Minnesota? So I could keep up. So lawmakers are reading the newspaper. Just that's every day. Sometimes we'd print off the clips for our boss. He would read them in the car, etc. We'd highlight the ones that are most important, but all of us always scan them every day. So media advocacy. Then we have direct lobbying. And this is what people think of mostly when they think of advocacy, right? Oh my God, someone just said I used to get up at 5 a.m. to do that for my association, LOL. See, I'm not awesome. I love, like I said, I don't know what time they woke up. I was just thankful it wasn't me. So then we have direct lobbying, and this is what people think about when they think about advocacy, right? People in suits, going to the Capitol, talking to lobbyists. And so these are people who are paid and who are paid to lobby, who are paid to create relationships with lawmakers, who are paid to know the ins and outs, who are paid to know the inside ball game, right? So these are lobbying. And sometimes we have we're going to talk about constituent lobbying. And I said they get a bad rap, doing deals and smoky backroom bars, which they can't do anymore because of other lobbying. But the field of lobbying is changing too, and I love it. I think it's great. It's becoming more accessible. It's becoming more diverse. But this is really having a paid person who does lobbying on behalf of your organization. And then there's constituent engagement or grassroots advocacy or grassroots lobbying. It can go by all different sorts of names. And this is where you ask people to contact lawmakers on your behalf. Yeah, sorry about that link. Sometimes people change their link, so I'll try to find that. Sorry about that. I'll do that before we send this out. So yeah, this is when you ask people to contact their lawmakers about a specific issue. That is grassroots advocacy, constituent advocacy, whatever you want to call it. And this is what we're going to really focus on today and why nonprofits are perfectly suited to do this. Again, many nonprofits do all three of these things. I would say the most successful ones do all three of these things in their advocacy department. I know many, many, many nonprofits who just have a lobbyist and call it a day. Boom, not my job. I've got a lobbyist up there. I think that's short-sighted. I'm going to talk about that. And you're obviously not leveraging all your great, amazing assets and superpowers when you do that. But many organizations do that. Some are stronger on the media advocacy piece. I worked for an organization in healthcare in California called Healthcare Access, Health. Oh my God, Health Access California. Yeah, I'm getting old, you guys. And they were very strong in media advocacy, and I was their communications director as one of the things they did. So yeah, different organizations can do different things, but nonprofits really, we're going to talk about this constituent engagement piece. So yeah, let's talk about what's holding nonprofits back from engaging. We've talked about this. We just did that little pop quiz. Don't know how, scared to, all that jazz. One thing I want to say, one of the biggest mindsets is people conflate advocacy with politics. They think advocacy equals politics. Advocacy does not equal politics. What is politics? Okay, this is where I have to give this disclaimer. I'm actually married to an attorney. So he's like, do you give the disclaimer that you're not an attorney and this is not legal advice? It's like, oh, sometimes I remember that. So I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to play one on TV often, but, and I'm not a nonprofit accountant. So, but take that as you will. It's not advice, legal advice. So what is politics? We call these big P politics. Big P politics in the eyes of the IRS is political parties, candidates, and elections. Now you don't have a little star next to elections. These are things that nonprofits should steer clear of. Anything. Don't mention a political party name. Don't mention someone running for office, currently running for office. So right now, unless it's a special election, no one's really running for office right now, right? They're sitting elected officials. And then elections. Now, of course, nonprofits can engage in what we call democracy building activities. Again, I can do a whole another webinar on this. But that's where encouraging people to register to vote, telling them how to vote, telling them where to vote, right? All of those things. That's democracy building, and nonprofits should absolutely be doing that. And there's a whole bunch of great research that I'll share later about when nonprofits do that, we have better policy making systems. But as long as you stay away from what I'm going to call big P politics, political parties, candidates, and elections, you are fine. What's not politics? These are not, I'm going to go through some more things. Issue education, voting records, research and data. So this is one of the things that people get caught up on, saying like, so-and-so voted, Senator Smith voted against, or Senator Smith voted for SNAP restrictions. That's not political. You are just actually living, you're just actually giving information. You're just actually giving info. You're just saying that someone voted a certain way. You didn't make a judgment call on it, right? And you can even make a judgment call on it because that person's not a candidate. But that's where kind of some of the gray area, people think is a gray area. Can I tell how people voted? Yes, absolutely. It's publicly available. Here's some more things. Which of these things, put in the chat, are big P political? Which of these things can nonprofits not talk about because they will get their hand slapped by the IRS or be risk of getting their 501c3 status revoked? Which of these? Now I know someone said DEI, that is a little sticky wicket. We'll talk about that, but you're like, none of these are big P political issues. None of them. I know right now it feels like all of them, but no, people have politicized these issues, right? I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. I do lots of people politicize my life, but I'm not a political entity, right? I'm just a human being walking around. The two I really love I added recently is the vaccines and masks and DEI. We cannot capitulate and let people drive the narrative that DEI is a political issue. It is not. Same with vaccines and masks. I also used to use fire hydrants as an example. One day, maybe people will be like, yellow fire hydrants are, I don't know what you would say. Jesus. I mean, yellow fire hydrants are the bane of our existence. Someone could say that someday and lots of people could believe it. And they're going to go around and say, we can't have yellow fire hydrants anymore. Doesn't make it political, right? Same with vaccines and masks. I would have never thought those would become political flashpoints, but they are. It doesn't make them in the eyes of the IRS, big P politics, right? Become small P politics. Now, don't get me wrong. When you talk about these things, you have to be like smart and aware about the political context in which you're talking about them, right? And you have to develop your strategy within a political context, but that doesn't mean you cannot talk about these things. I even had with one of my boards, we were talking about DEI, and one of the board members like, oh, we probably shouldn't. I said, we should call it the Trump administration, say we're not going, we wholeheartedly believe in our DEI programs and will not let, the Trump administration, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh my God, can we say that? Yes, sitting elected, we're going to go through some quizzes about a policy issue. Nothing in there is political. This is another thing where people get really caught up. Advocacy equals lobbying. So advocacy equals lobbying. Now, all lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying, right? And nonprofits can absolutely lobby. There's going to be restrictions and reporting, right, that you have to do about it. But as I say, I have only been a C3 lobbyist my whole entire life. I serve on the board of a C4 now. I've never even been a C4. I've only been a C3 lobbyist and done C3 advocacy. So it's absolutely, absolutely legal. Again, you have to file some paperwork, write some reports. I'll give you some resources on how to do that, but you absolutely can. So here's a little bullseye thing. So advocacy is the big bullseye. Everything's advocacy. Within it, lobbying is a little bit more restricted. And then ballot measures are even more restricted. Even though nonprofits can engage in ballot measures, I'm not going to talk a lot about that. That's not my area of expertise at all. But there are some good resources out there. But nonprofits can do all of these things. You just have to pay attention and be about how tracking it and how much time you're spending. So here are some free other advocacy activities. I kind of talked about some of them. Public education, research, enforcement of current laws. This is a big one, right? The Freedom to Breathe Act or the clean indoor air laws that I worked on. Who's enforcing them, right? That was a big deal the first 5 years of that law, is making sure people were actually, not smoking inside, and businesses weren't letting people do it. Commenting on regulation and agency policy. Lawmaker education, public opinion polling. I love it when nonprofits do that because that's so needed. Leadership and training, doing advocacy trainings, relationship building, and lobbying. And lobbying's the only one in here that is lobbying. Okay, so I see there's a question. If a senator's up for re-election as an incumbent, does that make them a candidate, or can you still comment on their current voting record? You totally can. So this is kind of tough because people are starting to like announce their candidacies earlier and earlier. But really, you don't, until election season's kind of in full swing, and that's kind of like, I consider that this is the gray area. There's no law that says there's nothing that says like at what point in time do we consider election time. But the rule of thumb for advocacy professionals, and please, anyone, if you disagree with this, is usually 6 months before the election. So I would say like June-ish, unless they're running for a primary and you have a primary in June, right? But this is where it gets a little tricky, and probably Sam is like, these are the gray areas that trip up lawyers. But because our election season is getting, like, our presidential election is like fucking 2 years long now or something, it does get a little gray area. But if they haven't filed, they're not a candidate yet, so they haven't put in the filing. They might talk about running again, that's fine, they're not officially a candidate. And then if they're not actually part of, like, if they're not part of a primary, I would always say like 6 months before. So November, like June to November is when I tell people to stay away from it. Now you can still comment on their voting record as an elected official, by the way. I should say that, right? You can say, you don't need to mention that they're a candidate. You can say Senator Smith voted no on our proposal. You didn't say they were, because they're still an elected official. Oh yes, Anissa, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just going to say what you just said. Like, I was like, I love you, Bethany. I slightly disagree, but you clarified yourself.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I love it. There's some other great advocacy consultants on this webinar. So yes, there's still a sitting representative. I used to have this happen with Senator Franken all the time. They'd be like, oh, well, he can't come visit because he's a candidate. I'm like, no, he is a United States senator, right? And this is not the campaign office. I'm like coming to visit you, right? I'm his official staff. I'm a federal employee. Yeah, so I had to do a lot of education about that too. And even when he was a candidate, I would even say I'm official staff. This is official business. He's still responsible for healthcare policy for the next 6 months, right? Even though he's a candidate. The campaign staff isn't coming. And it's actually like we also being like really clear if you're working with electeds who are running to let them know, and they know the rules. They should know them. But you should be like, just so this isn't going to be a campaign event, bring your official staff, or don't bring any campaign buttons, or no one's going to give you money here. Right. Just be really clear about that. And candidates they do this all the time. At least state and federal ones are a little bit more savvy. Okay, so we're going to talk about what is lobbying. So it's really narrowly defined. Direct lobbying is if you communicate with a lawmaker that expresses a view about a specific legislation. It has to check all 3 boxes. If it only checks 2, it's not lobbying. So I'm gonna give you some examples, and you guys are gonna tell me what kind of lobbying is. And then we also have to talk about grassroots lobbying, right? So that's communication with the public that expresses a view about a specific legislation that includes a call to action, right? So you're asking the public to do something. So I was just actually, I sit on the C4 board, and my goal is to have as much as our advocacy be under the C3 umbrella as possible, right? Because I want to reserve our resources for things that the C3 can't do. And so I had someone say, well, Isaac, I really think that we're a lot of this, our advocacy person's time, we're counting as advocacy or counting as lobbying. I don't think it is. And they're like, well, they sit in these committee hearings all day long. I'm like, sitting in a committee hearing, it's not lobbying. If they're just sitting there watching a committee hearing, right? Did they communicate with a lawmaker? Now, if they talk to a lawmaker right before they went to the committee hearing and say, hey, during this committee, I want you to vote no on this bill, that 5 minutes is lobbying. The hour spent in that committee hearing, not lobbying. But again, I have consultants that are lawyers who do this type of work, so that I will refer you to, but this is just thinking about, this is a primer on how to think about lobbying. So here we go. Is this lobbying? Tell me in the chat, is this lobbying? Dear Representative Smith, on behalf of Doing Good Nonprofit, we urge you to vote yes on House File 252. Legislation authored by Representative Finn. This bill would provide critical funding to allow nonprofits to purchase office nap pods and snack robots. Well, those don't sound great. Investments that will help our productivity. Supporting this means we're going to do better work. So is this lobbying? And what kind of lobbying is this? If it's yes, is this direct or grassroots? Right, you guys are so smart. Okay, is this lobbying? So the legislature is about to vote on the nap pods and snack robots. You put this social media post out. Call your legislators today and tell them vote yes. Let's support those who support our community. Is this grassroots lobbying or direct lobbying or nothing? Yes, it's grassroots. You guys are so good because it's got to check all the boxes. And then lastly, is this lobbying? You're at a community wellness fair and you say to this lawmaker, hey, studies show that healthier workplaces like snack pods, nap pods, and snack robots boost employee productivity. Is this lobbying? Nope. Yeah, you guys are all experts already. You're right. So this is how I think. And I even when I did this work, when I had a track, I would have this like cut out and like put on my little monitor, right? Just to remind myself, am I doing lobbying? Am I not doing lobbying? Because I had to write all, file the reports or whatever. But what I'm trying to show you is that lobbying is very narrowly defined. And most of what nonprofits do, even advocacy nonprofits, is advocacy and education. So more basics. So let's talk about how you're thinking about your campaign. So when you're thinking about advocacy, you want to think about what are you trying to change? Who has the authority to change that thing, to make that change? And when is the timing right? So think about a policy you want to improve. I just totally made these up. You can think about your own policy, write it down. Increase access to pre-K, childcare, decrease cancer rates. These are all things that people do. So think about what is your nonprofit. Think about a policy change you want to make. So what's the issue? You have the issue. Who has the authority to make that issue? I know you guys, sometimes when I do this slide, I'm like, I hope I'm not insulting people's intelligence, but people do not understand the different levels of government. I am reminded about that every single day on social media. We have different levels of government and they are in charge of different things. So we have local, school board, mayors, city councils, right? If states, federal, yada, yada. I cannot tell you, I have so many examples of people who called me at Senator Franklin's office that asked us about the potholes in their community, for example. I would just tell them, sorry, we are not in charge of potholes. I would love to give you the name of your city council member and you can contact them about your pothole. Or maybe it's you want to live on a county road and you contact your county commissioner. But I love to tell this story. It's one of my favorite stories. So in Senator Franken's office, we always shut down for the staff between Christmas and New Year's because usually Senate was on recess, but we never shut down for the Minnesota people. So you always got to voluntold, you had to do a phone shift where you got to sit with someone else and answer the phones during this time period. And this is the only time I really answer the phones. I didn't answer the phones a lot. And so this is always so enlightening to me when I got to answer the phones. And so this guy calls, we had a huge snowstorm in Minnesota. And if you're from any snow state, you know that you have snow emergency routes and you can't park on certain sides of the street when you have snow. So this guy calls and he is so mad. And he apparently didn't move his work truck appropriately and his work van got impounded by the city of St. Paul. And he called us, he wanted Senator Franken to get his truck out of the impound lot, pay the fee, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to explain to him, like there's so many things wrong with this scenario. Contrary to popular belief, we don't just have a checkbook. We can just go around writing checks to people. And second, this is not our area. Like we do not have anything to do with the snow plows and the impound lots. I'd love to connect you to your city council person, et cetera. But that is a great example of wrong target, not going to be able to be helpful to you. This happens all the time. So just think about that. And now some of these things are complicated, like childcare. Sometimes it could be a city issue, a city zoning issue versus a state policy issue, right? So that's where the policy research and development comes into play. But just make sure you're contacting the right person. So again, effective legislative advocacy. We also had this when I worked for the senator, Minnesota beat back a constitutional amendment to ban marriage equality and then instituted a law to make it law And so we had a lot of people contacting saying they thanked Senator Franken for this. And I'm like, he's a big proponent of marriage equality, and he supports what the state's doing, but he's not voting on this ever, this time. So a lot of education about that. So when's the right time to engage in legislative advocacy? The reason, this is like a very generic how a bill becomes a law. Why I put this up here is because we all know this for advocacy. There's many ways to kill a bill. There's only one path to passing a bill, right? And this just shows, this is what I like about this chart and what I take away from it as like a grassroots advocacy person is there's at least 7 times you can engage your people in advocacy when a bill is going through the process, right? At least 7 times. And this is the pathway of like least resistance. Usually there's like 27, 38 steps, right? Over maybe 10 years time. But that's what, when I look at this chart, that's what it reminds me of. These are all the ways, opportunities that you have to engage people in the policymaking process. When it's introduced, when it goes to the committee of origin, when it goes to a floor vote, when it goes to the other house. Now, different states do different things. Sometimes it has to go through run and then goes the other. Sometimes it goes concurrently. All states are different. But these are all opportunities for you to engage people in the legislative process. So how to determine timing? Well, first of all, you got to fit, what is it, a state, local, or federal issue? They all have different calendars, right? We're in the middle of state legislative sessions right now. Iowa's is ending next week. They might go into overtime, but usually they're January through June-ish. Only a few states have year-round legislatures. Federal, I mean, that's just continuously going or not going, depending on how you look at it. Or local, and local is very specific. The city council only meets on these times and see bills at these times and listens to bills at certain times. What do you need to do? Are you trying to educate people? Are you trying to convince them? Are you trying to get them to understand the current law? Like, that's also going to impact your timing. Be realistic about what you can accomplish in a certain time frame. This is another thing. Maybe we just want to, I always have people who come to me, very rarely do I see bills that get passed in one session, unless it's like a really niche bill. I mean, very rare. I mean, like the smoke-free bills I worked on had been happening for like 10 years. And I was so like, I got to come in the last 2 years and claim all the glory from it. But yeah, think about what you can accomplish and set goals for that time frame. Okay, so we want to find a strong author. We want to get it introduced. We want to get to have one committee hearing, or we want to broaden our coalition, or we want to increase the number of authors, right? What do you want to get done in a certain time frame, in a certain legislative session or a certain campaign? How far along are you? What has already been done? Obviously, how much work has been done on this already? Where's the public and lawmakers at on this right now? Is there a specific deadline you need to meet? All state legislatures have deadlines, have committee deadlines. It needs to hit certain markers or else it dies, as we say. So think about that. And is this a long-term effort or a short-term effort? Is this multi-bill, multi-year, right? And what piece are you working on? So those are just things to think about when you're thinking about timing. Okay, so let's talk about executive orders. This is new, you guys, brand new information, because I never had to talk about executive orders before very often. So what is an executive order? So it is a directive from the president that manages the operations of the federal government. I think that's really important for people to remember. It can carry the force of law, but it does not create laws. It does not create laws. It is not a law. And it directs the federal agencies to do things that are different. Maybe enforcement of certain things, non-enforcement of other things, right? So this is really important to hear. Things I want you to hear are these are not laws. And they're about operations. Okay. And why they matter to nonprofits. And we've seen this. They can shape our regulatory environment, right? They can shape how we, and what I think is most important about executive orders is they broadcast what laws or priorities that administration has. So a lot of these executive orders we might see and are seeing being turned into bills, right? So I think that's the most important thing about executive orders is this is how it gives us a mindset, a view into the mindset of how that administration is thinking about certain sectors, right? And how you could predict what we can see down the line. They can alter funding streams a little bit, as we've seen, but they can't just cut funding. We know this, and it shifts agency priorities. But Congress still holds the purse, the federal purse, right? And so we're seeing this and we're seeing these challenged in court. So I just want you to remember this. So when you're thinking about when we learned about lobbying, people ask me, can we speak out against executive orders? Is that a sitting lawmaker? Is it a candidate? Or I'm sorry, so is it a sitting lawmaker? Yes. No, the administration's not a lawmaker. Is it legislation? No. No. And if you talk to your lawmakers about executive orders, unless that executive order is going to become a law or become a bill, is in bill format, it's not considered lobbying. It has to be a live bill. You're talking to a lawmaker about and asking them to do something specifically. If there's no bill, you can't ask them to vote yes or no on it. You can't ask a lawmaker to vote yes or no on an executive order. Okay. Hope we all got that. So how can nonprofits push back? And we've been seeing this. Every day I kind of thank the Lord for the National Council of Nonprofits these days, because they are doing all of these things. You can monitor them, you can respond to them. So my organization that I am the director of is the Iowa Nonprofit Alliance. We just did a whole bunch of stuff this week about AmeriCorps, right? The AmeriCorps executive order, or the slashing of funding through that. You can mobilize your networks. You can comment and advocate. Litigation is a huge tool for the nonprofit sector right now. We're seeing that we have a system of checks and balances. And you can strengthen relationships. You can use this as an opportunity. This is what I want nonprofits to be doing. Use this as an opportunity to talk about nonprofits. Use this as a hook to talk about your work. You see this executive order that impact your work, you say, I want to tell you about this. I want to tell you why this is harmful. Or I want to tell you about what we do and why this wouldn't be helpful in the mission that we're trying to achieve. So that's when I think about executive orders, that's how I'm thinking about them as a nonprofit advocacy person. How am I communicating about this to my people? And how am I using this to talk more about our mission and what we need to do to solve it? And if I'm talking to other lawmakers, I wanted to use this as opportunities. I'm using all of these executive orders as a reason to contact our members of Congress and say, this is why the nonprofit sector is so important, or this is why SNAP is so important, or this is why AmeriCorps is so important, right? Okay. Question number 2. Yes, Eric, shout out to Diane's team. What do you think is the most compelling reason for your organization or your clients that you serve to engage in advocacy? So we did the 4 advocacy superpowers. So think about your organization or some of your clients. If you were going to make the case on why they should engage in advocacy or what lever they should pull, which one would you think? And you just throw it in the chat. Right? Does anyone want to jump off mute and share your reasoning? I'd love to hear. Love to hear what you're thinking there. Big and bold. Oh, Anissa, yes.
I mean, all of them are compelling reasons. I chose 3 because presumably your board and the people that might be against advocacy are pro the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more like speaking to the people that might be the most resistant.
Yes, that's good. Yep. It's also kind of think like, where's your nonprofit at in their advocacy journey, right? I was thinking, where are they at in their journey? Yes. Great. Yeah, all of these could be things, but I think it's really important for nonprofits to think about what you bring to the table. Like, what's your secret sauce, right? And that's what you should be really leaning into when you do advocacy. So we have some things in the chat. Yes, Eric. I know Eric says, does anyone else think we should all band together with the council, independent sector that is being talked about. Plans are in the making. So definitely on board with that. I'm always on board with that. I've tried to get our funders here in my state to fund something like that. People who care about our issues want to feel like they matter. Yep, advocacy makes their voice matter even more. Absolutely. So often direct nonprofits put Band-Aid on problems where policies, yep, it's not a bit, we have Band-Aid solutions. Exactly, we need to get upstream, as they say. All right, some great things going on in the chat. So let's talk about my favorite part of advocacy, why I'm here, is grassroots and understanding grassroots and its collective power. This is, again, where I think nonprofits shine and have a gold mine that we are not accessing every single day when it comes to advocacy. So I really try to reframe nonprofits to think about advocacy in terms of engagement stakeholder. It's bringing your people closer to your mission, right? It's one more way to bring people closer to your mission, right? Engaging them in advocacy. We engage them in volunteering, we engage them in fundraising, we engage them in other ways. Advocacy is just one more way to bring people closer to your mission. So that's why I try to get nonprofit leaders to think about. And this is the power of grassroots, right? None of these fish could get the shark by itself, but when we band together, we can get the shark. It's about using our we're all, and especially in nonprofit advocacy, we are stronger together than we are apart. And the closer we work together and we band together, the stronger we can be. So grassroots advocacy, again, we talked about this a little at the top, is organizing, mobilizing, engaging the public, your stakeholders, to advocate for themselves and hopefully your mission, right? And it's grounded in the belief that people matter and collective voices are powerful and can be powerful in shaping and influencing elected officials and our policy. That is the essence of grassroots organizing. Now, again, many organizations, I'm just going to get that lobby, I'm just going to get the lobbyist, I'm not going to think about it anymore. And I think that's just misguided. And it also isn't building power for your organization, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So again, you've heard me say this before, lawmakers want to hear from their constituents. When a bill or issue is before them, they think, what would my constituents want me to do? So again, if a bill about diabetes research comes in front of me as the Senate staffer, I'm thinking, what do their constituents want me to do? What is what do my constituents want me to do? And what's the best policy outcome here? And most lawmakers want to get reelected, and voting the will of their constituents is the way to do this, right? And if they're not hearing from you, they don't know the will of their constituents, right? So I do a lot of LGBTQ advocacy, and I say, I never want to hear, never, and they used to say this, they don't anymore because we've done a good job, there's no gay people in my district. You know, the lawmakers used to say that, by the way. That is not this is not folklore. This is from the 90s. Lawmakers used to say that, and we know that is factually untrue. LGBTQ people live in every single community in America. But you know what it was? They weren't hearing from us. And they weren't hearing from our allies. Now they are. We don't hear them say that anymore. Now we have other political problems in the LGBTQ community, but we are talking and speaking out. And no lawmaker is now saying there's no queer people in my communities. Thank God, right? So just think about that. So so all of nonprofits have, and nonprofit leaders and consultants have spheres of power. And you need to tap into your spheres to expand your power. This is another thing I hear nonprofit like, well, who would be talking? You have spheres of power. You have built-in advocates. You don't even have to leave the walls of your organization to find built-in advocates. You have staff, you have board of directors, you have donors, right? You don't even need to leave the hallways of your organization. Staff, I think are some of the best advocates I've ever seen. When I take people up to Capitol Hill and do lobby days, I love seeing staff. First of all, this is so different than usually the rest of the work they do. And it's so empowering to see them talk to a lawmaker about the work that they see every single day. Those are some of the best times I've ever had. Board of directors, your board of directors, they are politically connected. I guarantee, I don't even know any of the clients you work with or what organization, I guarantee at least one of your board of directors gives politically and gives a lot politically. And if you don't know who that is, you are just not leveraging that relationship. Donors, obviously they're giving politically. Like when I say giving politically, I mean giving like money to candidates or during our political parties during campaigns. Your donors are giving politically, they are engaged, and they are looking to you for information. This is another thing. There are not a lot of credible information sources out there, and people are not, people are very skeptical of all sorts of information sources, but consistently in polling, we have seen Nonprofit donors and volunteers still wholeheartedly believe in what you tell them and believe that you're a good source of information. We still see that. And then you have built-in advocates outside your organization. You have coalition members. Again, even if you're the most niche organization, maybe you make, you are a rural feline rescue organization. I am sure there's another organization that you could be in coalition with on policy issues. There's other stakeholders and there's community members. I love to tell this story. I was working for I worked for the Heart Association. And that was my first job out of college. And I think it was out of grad school. I was a grassroots advocacy director. And so I started my first week and they're like, okay, you're going to, recruit advocates to be, advocates or whatever. And I was like, awesome. We tout, I've read the literature because I'm a good interviewer. 1 million people in Minnesota walk in a heart walk every year. So I assume you have at least 1 million advocates, right? I mean, that's how big your advocacy. Oh, well, no, you will go to like science fairs and community health fairs and you'll go recruit advocates that way. And I was like, why would I go and ask perfect strangers on the street to be an advocate for the Heart Association? We have 1 million volunteers who spend like 3 months fundraising and then walking on a cold May morning. Why wouldn't we go? Are we not going to them? That's literally what I was like, just flabbergasted. I said, I don't need to leave this building to get advocates. I'm going to make best friends with all the development directors. And I'm going to share with them why engaging their donors and advocacy is going to help them. Right. So kind of rethinking how we think about that. So when you think about circles of engagement, I see this a lot too, where organizations are like, oh, we need to go talk to this person or that person. I'm like, if your CFO does not know what your legislative agenda is or your policy priorities, that is a problem. You need to make sure that, I call this cleaning your own house first. Make sure your leadership, your staff, and your board members all know what's going on, right? They should know what your policy priorities are. Then your key supporters and your key stakeholder groups. Now notice, we don't even get to those you serve until number 3, right? We have to make sure that you got your whole own house in order. And then of course it's your community and general public, right? And sometimes those you serve, again, are not, it's not feasible, like rural feline rescue organization, although bringing animals to the Capitol is my favorite day, I say, of the whole entire year. I will go to the Capitol any day there's Animal Rescue Day. I actually adopted my dog at a day on the Hill event for animal rescue. I was walking by a dog and I was like, I need to take that dog home today. Or if you work with children or international communities, sometimes people you serve is not appropriate or there's vulnerable. So you have to, I want you to just be thoughtful in how you engage the people you serve in your advocacy and pay them if you use their stories, et cetera. So what happens when we grow our power, right? When we really step in and see our power, what can happen? Well, I'm going to play this Queen video. You're probably like, what's Queen? What does Queen have to do with advocacy? Well, I will tell you. I need to click on this, share my screen. Can you guys see? I can't tell what you guys can see. Can you guys see the We Will Rock You on the screen? Are you seeing that?
No, just
No.
the slide still.
Oh, that's not good. Oh, you know why?
You may want to.
I didn't
Yeah,
stop.
yep.
Why is Zoom so tricky when it comes to this stuff?
And
Okay,
make
here
sure
we
you
go.
click the little sound thing.
Yeah. Can you guys
Great.
see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll close out some of this stuff. All right, here we go. We're going to watch a little, this is a 3-minute video. We're going to watch like 30 seconds of this. So no worry. So you're going to be thinking, what does Queen have to do with advocacy while you watch this video?
Stamp to this beat.
Can you hear it? It's very
Come on.
quick.
Now, I want you to clap on the 3rd beat. What's going on? You know if you're on time. I want to give the audience a song that they can perform. So what can they do? Imagine thousands of people doing this in unison. Huh? What's the lyric?
Bethany, I can't hear the sound anymore.
Okay. All right, I'll stop sharing that. Could you guys hear it? Okay, tell me.
Parts of
No,
it.
parts of it. I don't. Well, you guys know the song. If you don't know the song, then I don't know what to say. Okay, so you guys know the song. What do you think this has to do with advocacy? Why would I show a Queen video? Let me see. Yeah, let's see. We got find a way to engage people, keep it masses, teaching around easy message. Yeah, make it simple, all of those things. I loved doing this like when I'm in like in person and like really big. I love this. I get people up and I get them clapping, by the way. So standing up and clapping to Queen, which you're not expecting during an advocacy training. The band leads, but the power's in the crowd, right? They look for a leader. They want someone to lead them. But if you're I think of like if you just have a lobbyist or they're just like in the rotunda, just sadly clapping by themselves, like how sad is that, right? No, we are people. Yes, empowerment. Exactly, exactly. Let me see. Someone put something in. I want to read this message later. But someone puts a story in the chat. So even big movements, they have a visible leader, but the real power lies in activating your people. If you're not activating your people, you again, a gold mine. You're leaving so much on the table and not leveraging and not giving them the opportunity to be closer to your mission. I just wrote a blog post. I'm going to give you not a hard sell, but at the end, I hope you'll join my newsletter and take a look at my resources. But it was about an organization that I saw that did not engage their allies and still is not engaging their allies in a bill. And I'm just like, my mind is blown on this. I'm like, we want to help you. Tell us what to do. And there's like, anyway, invite people in. They want to help. They want to be engaged. So what about lobbyists? I started talking about lobbyists. Some of you guys are like, we don't have a lobbyist. What do? We don't have a lobbyist. Do we need a lobbyist? Is that important? Well, I think so. You don't have to have a lobbyist. Lobbyists are important because they know the who, the what, and the when, right? We talked about that earlier. They know the inside baseball. They know, who's doing what, where they're going. The great thing about lobbyists, they love to gossip, tell you what's going on. They really hold some of those relationships with lawmakers and know where they're at. But I think, again, if you just have a lobbyist and nothing else, you're so missing the mark. And that is because, as I talk about, success inside the Capitol is dependent on your power outside the Capitol, right? You could have the best lobbyist who meets with 60 zillion, lawmakers a day. First of all, only one of those are going to be a constituent of. But if the lawmaker doesn't feel like there's pressure from outside the Capitol, from their constituents or constituencies, they're not going to do anything about it. We see this. Advocacy is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That is the system here. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. And a lobbying strategy, as I said, is focused from moving one bill. It's a very tactical way of looking at things. It's moving bills from one point to the next, right? How do I get this introduced? How do I get in a committee? How do I get out of committee? But a grassroots strategy is focused on building power for your organization, and power is durable. And these are very different tactics and a very different way of looking at advocacy. So now we're going to talk about the power of relationships. Let's take a deep breath, you guys. Oh my gosh, it's already 11:20. So we're getting to the final innings. I don't know why I use sports analogies because I am not sporty at all. So I always think it's funny when I do that. So now we're going to talk about the power of relationships and with lawmakers and their staff, and how you as consultants can build these and how you can help your clients build them. So again, I've worked with lobbyists my whole entire life, and I had a great lobbyist that I worked with in Minnesota who told me this. Bethany, we're talking on the phone. She's like, I need to have a constituent to get a meeting. That's the only way to do it now. It's not like before. Right? We see this all the time in Iowa, where I live, pulling lawmakers off the floor. If you're not a constituent, I don't know, it's a 50-50 chance they might come out. Even as a constituent, my lawmakers don't come out very much. But you're much more likely to get that lawmaker out if you're a constituent. So I really love this. body of research and this organization called the Congressional Management Foundation. They have so many awesome things on their website. This research came out in 2017. I heard a rumor they're going to be redoing it soon. So I'm on their email list and I'm constantly checking their website. So while this is a little bit old, I still think it's relevant. And while it also relates to Congress, I still think it has a corollary to local and state officials. So they did this research where they asked all these lawmakers, all these members of Congress and their staff, so people like what I used to do, and they asked them, what's the most effective advocacy strategy? I'm talking direct lobbying, putting a full page ad in the New York Times or Washington Post, doing a radio ad, all that. What is the most effective advocacy strategy? And they said, above all, direct constituent interactions have more influence than any other advocacy strategy, hands down. Lawmakers place high value on relationships with their lawmakers and their staff, right? So if you're a nonprofit leader, I don't necessarily think this is like for the grass, but if you're a nonprofit leader, you should definitely, your lawmakers should know you by first name, right? It's a relationship. You want them to have you on speed dial, not pharma, not the insurance industry, whoever it might be. You want them right on speed dial. So develop a relationship. If you're a consultant, encourage your clients, your nonprofit leaders to develop relationships with their lawmakers. Citizen advocates are more influential when they provide personalized local information to lawmakers. Remember, we've talked about this. One of our superpowers is local information. Lawmakers love, how does this impact people in my district? How does this impact people in my county? Tell me more about that. And then citizens have a significant potential to enhance their advocacy skills. This one makes me chuckle because this is just like, people are really bad at lobbying. Do trainings. The easiest thing you can do is encourage your clients to do an advocacy training, or if you're a nonprofit leader, to hold an advocacy training like this one. So I think another thing that holds people back is we see this. I don't blame them. Advocacy is adversarial, right? We see it on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, people yelling at each other. I see lawmakers with really bad behavior, but advocacy is not inherently adversarial, and it doesn't have to be. I always tell people we're just going to work. Sometimes I don't like all the people I work with. It doesn't mean I can't go to work anymore, right? It doesn't mean I'm being mean to them. No, I just have to figure out a way to deal with them, right? So advocacy is not inherently adversarial. And I want nonprofits at the table. This is a very common advocacy saying, I want you at the table, not on the menu, right? And right now, I would say all nonprofits are on the menu. And again, not to blame the victim, but it's kind of our own doing because we haven't been at the table enough. And so they've seen us as being able to be on the menu. And when you're at the table and not on your menu, you're involved in discussions that could significantly impact your sector. You get ahead of the trends. You better understand the threats and opportunities to your sector. You're seen as an expert and a thought leader to decision makers and donors and the media, and you get access to all different sorts of donors and stakeholders, and you can run in new circles. It's a really great way to raise your visibility in your sector. And I think we see this with what Diane Yentl is doing with the National Council of Nonprofits. Maybe even a third of you didn't even know who NCN was before January. Well, now everyone knows, right? And I'm actually going to write, I wrote a case study on NCN. I'm going to be dropping it next week, people, about how did they make this shift from, policy librarian to policy powerhouse, right? Ooh, I might name it that. So we have a real life, example right in front of us. But wait, there's more. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. You can really, you guys, advocacy is good for the bottom line. These come out of some data from the M&R benchmark survey and some other research. People are 5 times more likely to open an advocacy message than a fundraising appeal, right? Advocates are 7 times more likely to donate to an organization than a non-advocate. And that makes sense. They're already engaged. Ask those advocates. They're more likely to give money. And those donors engaged in advocacy. So the advocates give on average 60% more than donors not engaged in advocacy. Advocates are awesome donors, and donors engaged in advocacy give more money. So if there's one, I hope not the only thing you take away from this is advocacy is good for the bottom line. But if that is something, fine. I hope it's because we're going to improve democracy and stuff. But these are often compelling things to boards. So I think this is the last question, you guys. So you're thinking about your clients, your organizations. If you wanted to up your advocacy game, what would you need the most help with? You're fired up. You're so jazzed right now. I can tell. I can feel the energy from the square boxes. What is the thing that you think you're going to have to do when you go back to your organizations, or what your clients are going to be struggling with? And just throw it in the chat. Is it getting buy-in from boss, leaders, donors, hiring a policy expert, figuring out your first steps, training? What do you think? Oh, thank you, Bix. We'll be sending out the recording so you get to see the last half, which excellent. So be thinking about that as you go back to your organizations. What makes most sense for you? So this last one, I'm going to go through pretty quickly. It's really just best practices. Sometimes I leave this off, but people really like this. When you working with lawmakers, there are best practices. There are ways to there are bad practices working with lawmakers. And I know this is someone who's sat across from people with bad practices. So just remember, you are the boss. You're the boss. Don't tell them this. They hate it. They hate it when you tell them this. But I want you, when you're walking in and going to talk to a lawmaker, or you're going to press that email, I want you to think, you hire your lawmakers through elections, right? We hire and fire them. Now, sometimes we've all sat on hiring committees, right? And the person we want to be hired for the job isn't hired, right? That has happened to me so many times. Does that mean I just don't get to show up for work the next day? Does it mean I get to be mean to Nancy, the new administrative assistant, even though she wasn't my first choice? No, you still have to do that, right? You still have to show up and be part of the process. Even the person that you didn't choose is there. You pay their salaries through taxes, and they're accountable to you. And the democratic process relies on your participation. If I haven't said this enough, they need to hear from you so they know what you're thinking and how to vote, especially as a leader of a nonprofit. Myths and barriers, we've already gone through this. I can't contact my lawmakers. You can. Now, whether you contact your lawmakers on behalf of your organization, that's something you need to figure out internally, right? Even if you're a private citizen, you can always contact your lawmakers on behalf of yourself. I just want to say that. Now, you might want to say, I'm not representing my organization today, or you might say, I am representing my organization today. Just got to be cognizant of that. Do they even listen or care? I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning if I didn't believe they did, right? Not everyone listens or cares about what I have to say. I am very well aware of that. But I do think that our lawmakers listen and care. Again, maybe not to me, but to others. So my lawmaker is very conservative or very liberal. So does it matter? The next three are like, so does it matter if I contact them? My lawmakers already made up their mind. My lawmakers already decided how to vote. Now, when you're doing grassroots, when you're doing grassroots advocacy, you do want to be strategic in how you engage your constituency. You don't want to burn them out. You do want to have targets. You want to have them reaching out to people, but you also want them to know that it's not over to the fat lady sings. We know this. We have seen lawmakers change their mind before they press that button, that voting button, that yes or no button that goes up on the scoreboard, right? So I like to tell this story. I'm just going to do it really quickly because I want to have time for questions. But last year, there was a key vote on the Marriage Equality Act in the Senate. And we had heard that Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa might be movable. And so I was brought in to help lobby her and do some grassroots engagement. And if you would have told me 6-7 years ago when she was elected that Joni Ernst would have made a favorable vote on marriage equality or anything LGBTQ related, I would have laughed. I might not have laughed because that would have been rude, but I would have been disbelief. I would not have believed you. She changed her mind. She voted in favor of an LGBTQ issue. I'm still dumbfounded about it today. But I'm using it as an example of never count them out, right? We didn't count her out. We had good intelligence and we kept talking to her. Now, let's say you and your lawmaker are perfectly in line on all issues. Awesome. Contact them and say, thank you. Thank you for standing up thank you. I know it's hard. Lawmakers do not get enough thank you calls. I'll just say that they rarely get thank you calls. So you can always call up your lawmaker and thank them for what they're doing if you're appreciative of it. Thank you, everyone. Last, be personable and professional, right? We're just at work. We're just talk to people like you're at work. Again, I've seen lawmakers act in bad ways. Don't raise your voices. And sometimes it's to recognize I'm not always the best person to talk on this issue. There's a lot of issues that impact me personally that I get really fired up about, that I'm like, I might not be the right person to talk to this lawmaker. I might not be very persuasive. I'm too close to the issue, or, so make strategic decisions. Share your story, but be succinct. We haven't even talked about storytelling. I do a whole workshop on just storytelling. And as I say, a fact sheet never changed anyone's mind. Share your story, but be succinct. Be mindful of time. There are always going to be time constraints. They're going to be pulled off the floor to vote. They're going to have other meetings, right? You do not have unlimited time. So do basic research about your target. And I'm going to share, have Lauren share a lawmaker research worksheet. I love doing this with the board of directors, with staff, etc. But just do basic research. Find out, do they go to your alma mater? Do they? I just learned, so one of my lawmakers that I'm very ideologically opposed to with, we don't have very much in common. I just found out that he taught Japanese, English in Japan. My kiddo is so into Japanese culture right now. We went to Japan for 3 weeks. So I am so excited the next time I see him to tell him that we have this in common. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're into Japanese culture, Mike. And then, right, because we're all human. This is my favorite one though. Ask questions of the staffer or lawmaker. I cannot tell you how many times you can use this as a great way, especially if you're talking to someone who doesn't agree with you and you're not going to change their mind. You can say something like, who else are you listening to about this issue? Ooh, this is my favorite one. Do you have any flexible thinking on this issue? No one wants to say they're not flexible, right? Because then after they say, well, yes, okay, well, then that's the perfect time to go into your spiel, right? Who else are you talking to? What other kinds of information would you like? Right? Use that valuable time to get more information. Be patient and persistent. Always say thanks. Last, always make the ask. Again, I cannot tell you, as Senator Franken staffer, how many times I sat across the desk from people and all I thought to myself was, please don't ask me how he's going to vote on this. Please don't ask me how he's going to vote on this. And if they didn't ask, I didn't offer if it wasn't what they wanted to hear. Now, if he was perfectly aligned, I sometimes started the conversation with, oh my God, we're so glad you're here. Al is in line with you. We're so excited to vote yes on this bill, right? But if they didn't ask me, I didn't volunteer it up. So say, can we rely on you for this vote? And then you just are silent and you stare at them and you count to 5 hippopotamus. They're going to say something. They might not answer the question directly, but give them the chance to answer the question, right? Can I count on you for your vote? Always make the ask. You'll be surprised at how many people do not make the ask. So again, what doesn't work, being confrontational, lying. Now, I don't say lying like people like intentionally lie, but I think I've just positioned you as like a subject matter expert, and they might ask you a question, a policy question that you might not know the answer to. Just say, I don't know. That is a great question. I don't know the answer. I'd love to get back to you. And it's always great because you always want to, then you can send them an email and get back to them. If you have lobbyists, there's nothing more than lobbyists love than to follow up with lawmakers. Say, that's a great question. I would love to have our lobbyists follow up with you, and you go tell your lobbyists. So just don't lie. Just say, that's a great question. I don't know. Being flaky, don't not show up for your meetings. I can't tell you. I think I have a little notebook from when I worked for the center of people who didn't show up for their meetings that I would curse at night. Just show up for your meetings, or, emergencies happen, but just let them know. Don't be flaky. So contacting lawmakers that don't represent you. Now, there are a few cases in which you can do this. So if you're advocating on behalf of yourself, like, you've seen this in federal politics, contact so-and-so from Arizona or so-and-so from West Virginia. If they're not your senator or your lawmaker, do not contact them. They do not care. This is something we called senatorial deference. If we had people contact us from Texas constantly, and I would say, thank you so much. We do not represent the people of Texas. I'd love to give you Senator Cruz's phone number, and I would look it up for them. And what you're doing is you're not contacting your own lawmakers. You're clogging up the phone lines for their own constituents. If you want to do something, find people in those districts or states and have them contact their lawmaker. Now, maybe they're a chair of a committee, or they sit on an important committee. Maybe you represent people that you serve in their service area, right? They're in your service area. then you can contact them. If you're a leader of a nonprofit and you're like, we cover the state, but the best thing is to find a constituent to contact them. And then contacting administrative offices. There's a whole bunch of acronyms here, but the DOJ, the GAO, the Education Department, the Health and Human Services, they are not set up for constituent engagement. There's formal processes through public commenting, et cetera. Contact them. Now, of course, you can always contact federal, Department of Education staff at your state and talk to them about issues, right? But don't encourage people to like spam the Department of Education with letters. They don't have a way to, just think if you got 2,000 emails tomorrow from angry constituents, how would you manage that? That's what Jane at the DOJ is thinking, okay? They just don't have the way to prioritize and get back to them like lawmakers' offices do. Okay, so how should you contact your lawmakers? So I have people ask me, someone to talk about if you have an adversarial relationship with a lawmaker. Yeah, sometimes know when it's just going to do more harm than good, right? And like I said, I've seen lots of bad behavior from lawmakers too. But if it's going to not be a good environment, a good interaction, just don't go. Cut your losses, do effective advocacy, go somewhere else. So some people ask me, people love to tweet at their lawmakers, social media posts. If that's what, I do not consider that effective legislative advocacy. Tweeting at your lawmaker is not effective legislative advocacy because for certain reasons. No one is counting those tweets. No one knows if you're a constituent. So when I worked in Senator Franken's office, every morning we got reports from the day before that said what the most calls were that we got on certain topics and what the most emails were. So we kind of knew what was popping, right? They would be like, Bethany, some kind of healthcare issues happening on the phone. We need some talking points. And then I would be like, oh, something's popping in this issue. And then I know to contact an organization or their lobbyist or whatever, right? No one's telling me how many tweets Senator Franken got on an issue. Now, don't get me wrong. Social media is great for organizing the masses, like getting people to contact their lawmakers, but just I don't ever usually have social media campaigns where you're talking. Yeah. You should also follow your lawmakers to see what are they talking about? How are they talking? Reporters follow lawmakers, et cetera. But in terms of effective legislative advocacy, I'm saying don't waste your time. So you are going to reach out to your lawmaker. So there's different ways to connect. I'm talking about calling, emailing, and meetings. Now the gold standard is a meeting. That is the gold standard. Face-to-face meeting, gold standard. By far, hands down. Is Congress still on Twitter? I don't know. That's a good, I don't ever do Twitter, so I don't know if Congress is on Twitter. That's a good, maybe someone else can ask Anissa or how they switch or whatever the other one is. I'm so bad. So you want to get a meeting face to face. That's kind of hard. Sometimes you don't have time, but that's the gold standard, right? Otherwise, it's calling is the second best way. Now, this is where advocacy has really evolved. When I started in advocacy, email was all the rage. Email had just come on the scene. Everyone like email. Now email's not all the rage, right? Calling is definitely the best. Now, if you're too scared to call, I get that. Especially, have you guys worked with any like Gen Zers? They're like, you're gonna call someone? Email then. If you can't muster up the courage to call, email. But you're just gonna get someone and leave a message. And sometimes I have scripts that I can give you. I create scripts for people. When you call, but you're really just going to talk to someone who's going to take a message or you're going to leave a voicemail. You're always going to say your name. Hi, I'm Bethany Snyder. I'm a constituent. I live in your district. I give them my zip code. I always start every message like that. If you want to get a meeting, you usually email about that. You email to get a meeting with the lawmaker. So these are the most effective ways. So what about staff? So if you're working with federal offices, obviously make best friends with the staff. Hands down, they are gatekeepers. If I have people who are mean to me, I would not recommend them for a meeting with my boss. Because I just don't want to, I would be in that meeting with them and I don't want to meet with mean people. I like to have good days at work. Yeah, if you call after hours, oh my God, that's a great hack. That's a great hack. Yeah, then you can always just leave a message. That's a good hack. I love that. Yeah, you can read the script. That's awesome. I love that, Sarah. So yeah, make best friends with the staff. Hands down. If they some state houses have professional staff, some have clerks, et cetera, et cetera. Well, just be nice to those people, make best friends with them, et cetera. Insider tip, another hack is if you're if you've been working with a staff person and you're going to be requesting a meeting, always CC that person. If I had just met with someone and they want a meeting with my boss, CC me on that. Because you know what's going to happen? The scheduler is going to come to me and be like, Bethany, should I honor this meeting? What do you think? And I'll say yes or no. And I'll likely say yes. Oh my gosh, I just met with that group. They're awesome. I totally think the boss should meet with them. If you don't CC me, I can't do that. I can't help you. Help me help you. And when you're meeting with that staff, ask them, what's the best way to make a meeting? Can you give me the scheduler's email address? Who should I call, etc. So, all right, we're coming to the end. You guys know all these great things about nonprofit advocacy, how to talk to your lobby, how to talk to your lawmakers, how to utilize your superpowers. So now what? What's the first step? These are the top 5 advocacy power moves for 2025. I think I'm going to write a blog on this. I haven't yet. Sometimes I get little inspirations during these trainings. So find and use your advocacy superpower. What's your advocacy superpower? Reframe your advocacy as mission work. We talked about this, right? You're just trying to solve your mission. You're just trying to do your mission. Build relationships before you need them. I haven't even talked about this. All the times that organizations like come to me, I'm like, when I worked for Senator Franken, or like they want to go meet with lawmakers, I'm like, we should have met with them months ago. Why are we meeting this? We're now in a crisis. This is not the best time to build relationships in a crisis, right? When I do these trainings in January, I always encourage nonprofit leaders to reach out with an introductory email that said, I have a little script, right? That I'm a leader of this nonprofit. I work in this community. I do this. I'd love to meet with you and tell you more about our organization so I can help you as these policy issues come before you, right? Turn your email list into an advocacy engine, right? If you have, first of all, if you don't have an email list, that's step 1. You should always have an email list and use that. Start including some advocacy messages, see how they do, right? Do some research. See, how does that advocacy message resonate? If I have an advocacy message with a PS fundraising campaign, how does that work, right? Pair data with real stories. Like I said, I do a whole training on storytelling. And hire a policy savvy consultant or advocacy expert to help you. That's your top number 5 advocacy move. So what about consultants? You guys can all do that stuff. But what I love about consultants, and I have a blog post about this, is how you can really help our nonprofits during this time. Know the laws and boundaries. You're here, you're learning it. Contact me, bring me on. I'd love to partner with you. If you're a fundraising consultant, if you're strategic planning, and they have some sort of advocacy component or should have it, please reach out to me. Encourage your clients to connect, their immediate needs to the broader trends, right? You're the help. You are glue. I see consultants as like glue between other sectors and your clients, to be other trends in your clients. Frame the work in context. Remind them that these are systemic issues, right? And they require advocacy, not just internal fixes. Use your flat platform as yourself. Build capacity for advocacy. Teach them how to integrate it, how they can do it. Again, I always say, don't go outside your lane. I am not here to do I do not do fundraising consulting. I do not do strategic planning consulting. I'm not telling anyone how to build a nonprofit budget, thankfully. So stay inside your lane, but then bring in those experts when you need them, and just challenge fear-based thinking. Oh my gosh, right? Challenge this. Yes, they're so siloed. Get people to work together, etc. And so many times they're so risk adverse. When, again, I think we can see this in the National Council of Nonprofits. I'm writing this case study right now. This is what happens when you push the envelope and you're big and bold, right? If they had just remained in their little cocoon and just put out policy briefs, where would we be right now? And where would NCN be right now? Okay, so what comes next? You're going to identify that one policy issue that threatens your mission. You're going to think about your superpower. You're going to talk with your board and staff about your advocacy role. You're going to research which decision makers have the power or authority to impact that. You're going to start a relationship with them. Sign up for their newsletter. They have these community coffees, you guys, all the time, especially out of session. They're literally just sitting in a caribou by themselves. Isn't that sad? Go sit in a caribou with them. Bring your annual report and say, I'd love to tell you more about our organization. Invite them for a site visit. Literally, they have federal staff, have people in your state right now literally sitting by the phone, waiting for you to call them. This was my job when I worked for a state office for Snyder to go on site visits. I literally was just sitting by the phone waiting for people to invite me. I mean, a little bit facetious. I had lots of job responsibilities, but that was one of them. How do you find out about their coffee hours? You sign up for their newsletter. They will tell you where they're going to be and when. And then when I worked for a senator, people stopped me in the grocery store, stopped me at the daycare. I didn't really appreciate that sometimes because I was in a hurry to get to office. But believe me, a lot of people are not shy about telling me about their things. And then reach out to a consultant to strengthen your advocacy program, right? I'm going to tell you that a lot because I love consultants. I think they're great. All right. We're to the end of this. Oh my gosh, you guys, I feel like I could do a little like calisthenics now, stretching. While you guys think about your questions for me, I have a few more slides I'm going to share, but then I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to close this out, but start thinking, this is your Ask an Expert portion of it. So here are some resources. We'll send this out with links. Boulder Advocacy and Alliance for Justice have great resources, especially on some of that reporting I talked about. I didn't even talk about the H election, right? All of your org should be electing for that. Go to Board Source. Obviously, if you're not a member of your state association, what are you even doing, right? Join them. Join your state association. Because just so you guys know, like, so state associations pay money to be part of the National Council of Nonprofits, which then hire attorneys and policy experts. Because I just want to be real clear. That's how it works, people. We pay money, the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, Forefront, Georgia Association of Nonprofits, the Iowa Nonprofit Alliance. We pay dues to the National Council of Nonprofits, so you get all this amazing stuff. So you need to become a member of your nonprofit association so we can give more money to the National Council of Nonprofits. Nonprofit Vote is awesome, especially during election years. They give out a lot of great things. Obviously, Snyder Strategies. I am all over the hot takes. I'm calling people out. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll show you how to get on my email list. And of course, Consultants for Good. Join Consultants for Good. They have all these amazing resources. I need to read the landscape analysis, Lauren. I need to download that. Okay, so you can connect with me. I'm everywhere. Go to my website. You can email me, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be dropping a new resource tomorrow called How to Deal with Federal Shenanigans or something. That's going to have a lot of these resources that Lauren was sharing in the chat. And then if you want to just click your phone, you can get right to my advocacy tips, tools, and trends that way, or you can just go to my website. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share and we're going to just talk together now. Thank you so much. I love your expertise and energy. Because I feel like after I do these trainings, I ran like a marathon. But I know that people think advocacy inherently is like boring and stuff. So I try to make it not boring because I don't think it is. Anyone have any questions for me? I'm so thorough. Yeah, Viva, feel free to take yourself on mute. Yeah, just jump off mute. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. I don't know.
I can't either.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Maybe it's going to your Bluetooth speaker.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, wrong mic. Yeah, thank you for a really interesting presentation. I'm coming from a slightly different perspective. I'm a consultant. I am American, but I'm not based in the US.
Okay.
I'm based in the Netherlands, and unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of the same trends here as we are in the US. But because I'm coming from, a different kind of funding ecosystem, I'm wondering, I have kind of two questions. One, how do you see the use of leverage as an advocacy tool of looking for other sources of support, other sources of funding, to kind of use that and say, well, hey, elected official, we don't actually need your support. We can do this another way. And then, we're going to say, hey, you didn't support us on this. Maybe you're not going to get the votes of all the people who do support us. So just like using different forms of leverage, and I'm wondering how you see that. And then also I had a question about, you talked a lot about using allies and the community that you have. And I'm wondering how to kind of maximize tracking of like the ripple effect that you can have, because those numbers are so important, right? Like
Yes.
everybody cares about statistics. Everybody cares about we reached so many people. We had this many people stand up and say they support us. But often, it's very hard to track the ripple effect of how many people talk to people talk to people. So I'm
Yes.
just
Oh
wondering
my
if you have
God, that is
tips for
like
that.
the bane. That is the bane of my existence as an
Same.
advocate. Tracking advocacy, right? Because obviously passing a bill, yeah, yes, the advocacy worked, but that's going to take 10, 20 years, you know. That's why I think it's good to have, like I talked about when we talked about timing, and to have those little goals in there for your campaign, like how many, again, it's going to be different for what state you're in. How many co-authors do we have? How many coalition partners do we have? How many signatures do we get? I think it's making sure you have those goals set up. And so then you can track, that's how you can, I think you kind of track your ripple effect. How many letters did we have submitted to a lawmaker? There's software that does that. So that's how I would look at it. It's like get those little, always celebrate the little wins for sure. And I think that's the way to track is by having those little goals. Like, what is our goal for this campaign season or for this 3 months or whatever? Now, in terms of using your leverage, now you don't want to say to a lawmaker, we're not going to vote for you, because that's getting into elected stuff. Yeah, I've never really done, I've never really done the hard sell that way. I have though said like, we'll turn our people on to you. Like, do you want to get, what, do you need 3,000 letters tomorrow? Some of them are like, no, please don't. Yeah. Because it's more work for their staff. And we're like, oh, if you're not hearing us, we can make sure you hear us. I think that way is how like we can make sure you hear from us. That's the way I kind of use your people leverage. Because a lot of them don't want to get a ton of emails because it's more work for their staff. It's crowding out other works they might want to be doing. So they're like, no, 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 we'll do it, or yeah, maybe I do need to hear from 250 people. Yeah. So I think that's how you use that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
Anissa,
really
I know.
helpful. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Anissa, I know I see you had your hand up. I know she might have had to jump off. She sent an excellent, love your, yeah. I try to make my
It looks like she
emails
jumped off.
cheeky and witty. I'm sorry, what did someone say? Did you start talking, Anissa?
Oh.
Did I miss you?
I would say it looks like Anissa dropped off.
Oh, okay. Any other questions that you have? Oh, Sarah Long Holland.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. This was interesting and informative. And I'm not sure this is a question, but maybe a topic for more conversation. I've been talking about this in some circles and would love to generate more conversation around this. This is going back to the nonprofit superpowers that you mentioned and the data and the stories that we all hold. And one of the things that I've been observing, I work a lot in the fundraising space, and especially with smaller arts organizations. And something that I've been seeing is that with a movement towards trust-based philanthropy, part of funders, nonprofits are not actually having to do those begrudging grant reports that you talk about.
Yeah.
So I think that we as a field, as a sector, as consultants, we need to be thinking about that as we support our clients, because the stories that you used to be able to just go back to that grant report and pull them out for your advocacy, now those grant reports are not necessarily as robust. Sometimes they're not there, or maybe it was a conversation with the funder and the funder is holding the data, but you don't have that report yourself, so you won't have that data. I don't have the answers to this, and I don't really have a question about it. I'm kind of raising it as a field for contemplation and discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hey, all funders, I hope they don't hear this because they're gonna be like, see, that's why these grant reports are so useful. More reports. No, two things that are bane of my existence as an advocacy person is tracking effects, tracking progress, and then storytelling, story collection. Always, every organization, like, how do we collect stories? How do we get them? How do we store them? How do we organize them? How do we make sure people have access to them? I've helped organizations develop that system because it's just really dependent on the system, the organization themselves. But yeah, that's another bane of my existence as an advocacy person is how do you get that story collection program effective and efficient? Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't dislike the movement towards trust-based philanthropy.
No,
but I want the stories. And I think that too often because so many of those stories lived in grant reports, then you had the stories that spoke to the priorities of that funder rather than the stories that speak to the priorities of the nonprofit. So I think but right now there's this gap where there's just not enough storytelling and there's not enough, we need to build new muscles in around this.
Oh my gosh. Someone just talked about, don't even get me started on funders and advocacy. If you followed me for one day on LinkedIn, you'll know that I get super fired up. I wrote a whole blog post about that. It's called Why Funders Are the White Gay Men of the LGBTQ sector. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in the link. I'm gonna put that that link in here. But yeah, funders, oh my gosh. People who have power who could be standing up right now, don't even get me started. But you're right. Oftentimes the stories for funders are not going to be the same as for lawmakers. So it's really important to like, are we tagging stories? I mean, it gets so technical and boring when we start talking about that.
Thank you.
Oh, here's this funders. This is your defining moment. This one isn't as cheeky as the one I posted on LinkedIn, but everyone else? Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bethany. Before we close, I want to ask all of you to turn on your cameras again, if you're willing to. And for a moment, just take a moment to look around at who is in this virtual room today. I know that this work can often feel very lonely, can feel very siloed, can feel confusing. But look around at this community today. Maybe again, make eye contact with somebody and give a little wave, even if people don't know that that's who you're looking at. But just appreciate being able to show up here in this space together and come together with all these organizations, all of these humans that also really care about the same things that you do. And Bethany, do you have a slide for the quote, or should I just go ahead?
I got it.
And as she's pulling that up, one thing that I'll say is, as I've been in conversations with, my family, a lot of folks that don't work in the nonprofit sector or in this space, I'm hearing a lot of sadness and fear and desperation. And while I feel that, and I think that there's truth in that right now, I also feel really impressed and inspired watching the people in this community, in the nonprofit sector, standing up for things, supporting each other, and really showing up where we can. So as you're looking around, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I consider this to be one of those small groups. So thanks everyone for joining today. And thanks, Bethany.
And one last thing. Yes, thank you. Please give me feedback. That's all I ask in return from you is feedback. So thank you. I've so enjoyed that.
Thanks so much, everyone.